Right guys, so let's talk about your pelvis. So you may have heard a yoga teacher say, I want you to posteriorly tilt, or I want you're moving now in an anterior tilt, or you know, get your pelvis in neutral, or tuck your tailbone, and you're sitting here going, what is she asking me to do? And you're just, you know, flailing around and not having a clue. Some of these concepts are quite difficult to understand. What I want you to try to remember is that anterior is at the front. I like to remember this as that A, it's the first thing in the alphabet, so it's leading the way. Okay, so anterior is leading the way. Posterior is the back side. Okay, posterior later in the alphabet, so it's, you know, trailing behind the A. So that's how I remember these two. So what people often get confused about then is, well, how is my pelvis tilting? And most people think it's the pubic bone. So if I'm doing this with the pubic bone, then I'm anterior tilting. And if I'm doing that with the pelvis bone, or the pubic bone rather, then I'm going into a posterior tilt. This isn't the case. So I want you to imagine that your pelvis, okay, this whole space here is like a big old bowl, okay, and it's filled with water. And if the water is to tilt forwards, then that's an anterior tilt. And if the water is to pour backwards, that's a posterior tilt. So where the water's going is the way it's going. Well, what the heck am I talking about? Where's the water? How am I pouring it? So connect your fingers together in a circle, and then bring your circle like a viewing glass down to the ocean and look down. You're then going to separate that circle, and you've got two C's that you're left with. You're then going to attach these onto the bony ridges of the very top of your pelvis, okay? So you should be able to feel those bones. I've got a lot of padding and I can still feel them, so dig in. Okay, so I want you to look at my hand. If you're looking, okay, at my fingers, I'll try and move my hand. So how am I tilting my water? If my pelvis holds the water, am I tilting the water backwards, or am I tilting the water forwards? This is a natural stance. I'm not doing anything here. I'm pouring the water forwards, okay? So this means that I naturally stand in a posterior tilt. If I'm really exaggerating, I lock out my knees, stand further away so you can see. This is how bad the way I stand. So I lock out my knees, you can see there kind of bonk going backwards. I lean into my lower back, I don't engage my core, and my butt is totally soft, okay? So I have very weak glutes. For a butt my big, I was totally shocked when I found this out, but they are not engaging. I'm dumping into my flexibility, whoomp. Okay, this is really exaggerated, but this is how I naturally stand. If I go standing naturally, I'm still kind of locking at my knees, my butt is still lifting, and I'm in a natural anterior tilt. Okay, now some of you are going to be in the other camp, where you're standing. It's quite difficult for me to do because I have to really engage my butt and it's quite weak. So some of you are standing like this, okay? You'll see people walk around, they look like this. That is a posterior tilt, okay? So why are we standing like this? Well, this has to do with our hamstrings being quite tight, okay? So the hamstring connects sort of at the butt, the base of the pelvis, and then goes just beyond the knee. Well, if this is tight, okay, so the longer it is, the more you can bring your bum away from those hamstrings. The tighter it is, the more the back of your butt is gonna drop down and the front of your hips are gonna lift. So you look a bit like this, okay? Also not a very nice stance. So I want you to take your hands onto those bony bits and then try to find neutral, okay? It's gonna feel weird. For me, I'm all of a sudden like, oh, I've got to really engage my core and my butt has to really switch on. Okay, and if I walk around like this, I'm actually feeling a lot more stable. It's weird, okay? It's definitely weird for me, but I'm not walking around like this, which is how I normally walk. Nothing is engaged here. So if I can just every once in a while put my hands there, go, okay, that's neutral. So why does neutral matter? Well, neutral is our starting line, okay? So if we start from neutral, then we have more of a range to go into that anterior tilt, and we should then have more of a range to go into that posterior tilt. I struggle with posterior. Why do I struggle with posterior? Well, because my natural stance is anterior. So to get me to neutral is a mission, and then to get me past neutral is even further. Ugh, so it's very difficult. I really struggle going into posterior tilt. Now, neutral, starting point. That means that we can go forwards, and that means that we can go backwards. So if you are someone who is a posterior tilter, getting then those hips to come all the way around to the opposite direction is going to be quite challenging for you. So the further that your neutral is from one end of that spectrum, the harder it's going to be to get there, where you want to be smack dab in the middle so that it's easier to kind of go between those two ranges of motion. So remember, C, you're going to take those fingers, take them onto your hips, kind of even that out if you can. It's going to feel weird. You're going to feel like you're over exaggerating, and you're going to try and stay there. Okay? You might just maybe make dinner like this. You might walk around like this, but just start to feel what muscles are having to engage. Okay? I'm going to do a video series for stretches if you've got a posterior tilt, so if you're in this camp, and I'm going to do a series of stretches for an anterior tilt. Okay? So if you're in the duck booty like myself, then you'll have that. But first of all, get your head wrapped around this front and backwards tilt. Hope that was helpful. Do it with some friends and family. Sometimes you have to use a mirror, sometimes somebody has to do it for you, but just wrap your head around posterior tilt, neutral, anterior. Posterior behind, neutral center, anterior forwards. Well done, guys. Good luck with your pelvises.